So, back to Psalm 25. We last time we looked at verse 15, and I just want to come back and say that in my mind, the point of verse 15 is return my focus often, always through the day. I mean, he says, my eyes are ever on the Lord. I will always have to return my focus to the Lord, his ways, his thoughts, his expressions. I live in a part of the world where I'm very fortunate and blessed that I see the beauty of his expression in nature all the time. There are mountains to the west that are, for me, they're majestic and gorgeous. I can take a drive through Red Rock Canyon, and it's just beautiful artistry in the rock formations and in the mountains. And, well, sometimes one of the ways for me to return my gaze and refocus is to drop back and look around at trees. And there's not much grass, but every once in a while, the grass, I don't know, wherever you are, that's one of the ways to kind of refocus and return your gaze, so that your eyes will return to the Lord. Okay, verse 16, turn to me and be gracious to me, for I am lonely and afflicted. Now, up to this point, the psalmist has, in my sense, the psalmist has been pretty optimistic, you know. And his life's not great, but here he talks about two things that I have to think all of us can relate to. He said, I am lonely and afflicted. Loneliness is an affliction in itself. But so what I'm seeing here is lonely. Well, that is an emotional issue. Afflicted, usually in those days, that referred to a physical issue, to be physically afflicted with sickness, with some disability of some kind, with pain. I don't know anybody who has never known loneliness and never known some form, maybe even a mild form of affliction. But I know a lot of people who are deeply, deeply affected by loneliness and moment by moment affected by the pain and the disability of their life. Excuse me. You remember when we all became prisoners to our homes at the front end of the COVID pandemic? And I'm not throwing blame in any direction, but I'm just saying we all thought, because we had been told, this was the way to end the pandemic. Remember at the very beginning, we can pull this, we can make this happen. We're all in this together. Well, no, we weren't. There were, never mind. But ever since then, I mean, this is verifiable by the scientific surveys that a variety of institutions have done. Ever since then, in 2019, when the lockdown began, isolation and loneliness have been two of the biggest issues in people's lives. Well, there's a reason. We are made by God for connection. He intends for us to connect in relationships. And when we are isolated, we're going to feel lonely. It's not like, if you had a stronger mental and emotional constitution, if you loved Jesus more, if you were more disciplined, you wouldn't be lonely. No, that's not. I find that to be not true at all. I have a word for it that I can't use here, but you probably have a word too. Turn to me and be gracious to me. That's what because I'm lonely and afflicted. When you're lonely and afflicted, man, one or the other is bad enough. But when it's both, what do you need? What would most be helpful to you? Well, I don't know. I know for me, a compassionate connection is most helpful. That's what he's looking for. Turn to me and be gracious to me. This is an idea, excuse me, from in the Old Testament that's in many different places. The Levitical blessing in Deuteronomy, or Numbers rather, where he says, may the Lord bless you and keep you. And part of it is, may the Lord turn his face to you and be gracious to you. Well, God doesn't ever look away from us. So in a literal sense, not possible for him to turn and face us, turn his face to us. But symbolically, what that means is, I need to sense your presence, your care, your attention. Have you ever had times where you felt like, I know God's got to be there, but I'm not feeling it? Is there, if my faith and my walk is mainly on the condition that I feel God's presence, I'm toast. Me. I'm not talking about you, but I'm talking about me. Because I don't always feel his presence. I believe I can never not be in his presence. That he will never turn away from me. I believe that, but I don't always feel it. Does that make any sense? And what the psalmist is saying, I need to sense your presence. Turn to me. I need to feel your attention and be gracious to me. Meaning, oh Lord, give me what I don't deserve. That's what grace is, getting what we don't and could not deserve. Be gracious to me. The grace of God shows up in so many different ways. I've said it before lots of times, but grace is my favorite theme in all the Bible. I am learning, and boy am I a slow learner, to live my life breathing in and breathing out grace. I want that everybody who encounters me would get the splash over effect of God's grace coming into my life and to others' lives. I don't always do this very well. Boy, can my wife attest to that. But I am learning. God is gracious. Well, a little challenge. Ponder today, sometime. I usually ponder best when I'm writing it, but you may not, so it's up to you. ponder, when in the last 48 hours has God's grace been evident to you? And often we have to do that in reflection. A lot of times I'm just trying to figure out, what do I do next? Where am I going? And I don't even notice God's grace. So what I'm challenging you with is an intentional reflection, a look back to see, sense, notice the grace of God. Turn to me and be gracious to me, for I am lonely and afflicted. What a good prayer. Verse 17, relieve the troubles of my heart and free me from my anguish. Now we're getting a little bit of an indication that the trauma, the difficulty that the psalmist is feeling is on an emotional level. Relieve the trouble of my heart. I'm not a fan of the seasons of my life where my heart is troubled. I hate this, but it's true. My heart is easily troubled. There are times when my heart is legitimately troubled. Last night, one of my dearest friends in all the world called to tell me that his dad died. It troubled my heart. I want to fly wherever I can to Joe and just be there. There are no words that are going to make this any better, but my heart was troubled because I'm not going to be able to do that. I sometimes look at the condition of the world around me, and I'm talking about the moral and spiritual condition of the world, and my heart is troubled. I think legitimately. Then there are other times where my heart is troubled because I'm not getting what I want when I want it. That's just immaturity. But when my heart is troubled, there's literally no part of my life that is not touched by that trouble. Relieve the trouble of my heart and free me from my anguish. Okay, so this is not a request for, Lord, help me to think my way through this. Lord, I need your help to reframe what I'm thinking and feeling. Now, those are legitimate things to do. But the psalmist he's calling out to God for relief. That is not a selfish or needless prayer. And how God sends relief could be very different from person to person. Relieve the trouble of my heart and free me from my anguish. There's a difference between me being upset, me being unhappy, and real anguish. And sometimes we don't, that distinction, the difference kind of blurs. There's a lot of people in the world that they're inconvenienced and they think it's anguish. And I'm one of those people. I'm not talking about inconvenience here. We're talking about anguish. Don't forget, please don't forget, that God understands our anguish. So it's only right for us to appeal to Him for relief from it. And we may have to do that 1,000,000 times. I don't have a great explanation for why that is. The best I can do is to say, because He will relieve our anguish at just the right time. Well, my time's up, so I'm going to close. See you next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.